Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. The Fourth Amendment was written for a world where searches meant boots on porches, hands in pockets, and doors kicked in at midnight. It was drafted to restrain human officers in physical invasions, not machine learning models quietly sifting through oceans of data. Yet policing has shifted from the world the framers knew to one they could hardly imagine, a world of dragnet surveillance, ubiquitous data collection, and AI-driven prediction. The core danger is simple: a constitutional framework built around individualized suspicion and particularized warrants is being hollowed out by tools that operate at mass scale, by default, and in secret. So let's talk about what that actually looks like in practice. Modern policing increasingly starts not with a tip, a victim, or a crime scene, but with data. License plate readers hoover up the location of every car that passes. Facial recognition systems probe public cameras for matches. Social media monitoring tools scrape posts and connections. Phone location databases quietly log where people sleep, work, worship, and protest. None of these systems needs a warrant to begin building a profile. Each one captures mostly innocent people going about lawful life, and each one is sold as mere information, not a search. The Fourth Amendment becomes a technicality you deal with later, if at all, rather than a barrier that must be crossed before the state intrudes. Now add artificial intelligence to that mix. AI does not change the basic mission of policing, but it supercharges the methods. Predictive policing models promise to forecast where crime will happen and who is likely to commit it. Risk-scoring algorithms promise to sort suspects, arrestees, and neighborhoods into tiers of danger. On paper, these systems sound neutral, scientific, almost antiseptic. In practice, they are built on historical data sets soaked in bias, over-policing of black and brown neighborhoods, discretionary stops driven by stereotypes, and arrests shaped by poverty rather than dangerousness. Feed that history into an algorithm and it will faithfully reproduce it, then wrap it in the authority of math. From a Fourth Amendment standpoint, that is catastrophic. The amendment's central protection is the requirement of probable cause and particularity. The state may not rummage through people's lives on a hunch, but AI systems, by design, encourage exactly that kind of rummaging. They generate risk scores, hotspots, and watch lists that tempt police to treat entire areas or categories of people as presumptively suspicious. Once an algorithm flags a block or a person as high risk, the pressure to stop more cars, question more pedestrians, and run more searches becomes irresistible. The tail wags the dog. The machine's prediction becomes the justification. Think about how that flips the constitutional logic on its head. Instead of officers needing a concrete, articulable reason to intrude on someone's privacy, people are effectively forced to prove they have nothing to hide in the face of opaque statistical claims. The reasonable expectation of privacy test becomes a cruel joke when the government can say, no one reasonably expects privacy in location data that every app collects. No one reasonably expects privacy in a face the cameras can see. No one reasonably expects privacy online because they consented by clicking I agree on a 50-page terms of service. The more normalized surveillance becomes, the easier it is to argue that privacy has evaporated, turning the Fourth Amendment into a shrinking island into a rising sea of data. And there's another twist: opacity. AI policing tools thrive in legal gray zones and institutional secrecy. Vendors hide their code behind trade secret claims. Police departments sign non-disclosure agreements that prevent defense attorneys and sometimes even judges from knowing how a system works or how often it fails. When defendants cannot challenge the reliability or bias of the tools that help put them under suspicion, the adversarial system collapses. The constitutional right to confront the evidence against you becomes hollow when that evidence is a proprietary model spitting out risk scores from a black box. Supporters of these technologies love to offer a familiar reassurance. If you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. They insist that algorithmic tools merely help limited police resources target genuine threats. That argument is both historically illiterate and constitutionally dangerous. The Fourth Amendment was never about protecting only the innocent. It was about binding the government to specific procedures so that no one, innocent or guilty, could be subjected to arbitrary power. When the state can monitor everyone all the time and retroactively construct a narrative of suspicion from years of stored data, the distinction between targeted investigation and general warrant disappears. The founders fought a revolution over that difference. So what would it look like to bring AI-age policing back under constitutional control? The law is not helpless here, but it needs to stop pretending that the digital world is some separate, law-free zone. Courts and legislatures can start by recognizing that bulk data collection that allows the government to reconstruct a detailed portrait of a person's life over time is a search, full stop, regardless of whether the information was voluntarily shared with a third party. If the state can trace your movements, your associations, your routines, your medical visits, and political meetings over months or years, that is not just metadata, it is a map of your life. That should trigger the Fourth Amendment at its highest setting. Next, any algorithmic tool used to trigger stops, searches, or arrests should be subject to strict disclosure requirements and adversarial testing. If the police will not open the black box, they should not be allowed to rely on it. A model that cannot withstand scrutiny in open court has no business helping to put people in handcuffs. That means defense lawyers need access to the underlying code, the training data, the error rates, and the testing procedures. It means judges need to be willing to exclude evidence that flows from opaque, untested systems the same way they would exclude evidence obtained through an unconstitutional search. But this cannot be left only to courts, reacting case by case, years after the fact. Democratic oversight has to catch up as well. City councils, state legislatures, and Congress should require public approval before agencies deploy new surveillance technologies, with sunset clauses, civil rights impact assessments, and independent audits baked in. Communities most likely to be targeted, particularly communities of color, should have a binding say in whether these systems are ever switched on. The default cannot be deploy first, justify later. The default must be that intrusive technologies remain off unless and until they can be squared with constitutional principle. There is also a cultural battle here, and it is about the stories society tells itself about safety and risk. AI policing is sold as a way to make everyone safer, but everyone rarely includes those who already are over-policed. When algorithms direct more patrols into certain neighborhoods, when they mark some bodies as inherently riskier than others, they deepen the very inequalities they claim to neutralize. The risk is that the public gets conditioned to see certain communities as permanent crime scenes, and constant surveillance is normal, even desirable. Once that mindset takes hold, the political will to defend the Fourth Amendment dries up. Ultimately, the question is not whether AI can make policing more efficient. It almost certainly can. The question is whether citizens want to live in a country where their efficiency trumps liberty. A state armed with ubiquitous sensors, infinite storage, and predictive algorithms does not need to kick down doors to chill dissent, punish disfavored groups, or silently track political enemies. It only needs to quietly redefine what privacy means and hope the public does not notice until it is too late. The Fourth Amendment is supposed to stand in the way of that transformation. So as you listen to debates about smart policing, data-driven public safety, and the wonders of artificial intelligence, it is worth asking a simple question. Who is being made safer, and at what cost? If constitutional law does not adapt to rein in digital dragnets and algorithmic suspicion, the text will remain, but the right it promises will have vanished. The task now is to insist that the principles written for a world of paper warrants and horse-drawn patrols still apply when the search comes from a server somewhere. This has been America's Fractured Politics. If you found this episode interesting, subscribe, share, and comment. Until next episode, thank you for listening.